Morning, everybody. I would like to start off by thanking everyone in our business community for the work they've put in through the onset of COVID. Through your feedback, we've been able to engage with our representatives at all levels of government to ensure businesses have the critical support they need to help navigate this challenging period. The Newmarket Chamber has been at the table every step of the way to ensure your voice is heard. Our success would not be possible without the continued engagement of our representatives who have proactively listened to business concerns and advocating for our business community. Today, I am joined by the Honourable Christine Elliott, Minister of Health and Deputy Premier, and also our MPP for Newmarket-Aurora. And on behalf of the Newmarket Chamber, I'd like to extend a special Newmarket welcome to MPP Stan Cho, Parliamentary Assistant to the Minister of Finance. It's great to have you with us, PHO. I know that a lot has been happening over the past week, and I am sure there are many issues that you would like to have addressed today. However, this is a town hall focusing on the budget, so we request that any questions or comments be budget related. At this point, because we'd like to get going here today, because of what we need to cover, I'll turn it over to Minister Elliott for remarks. Good morning, Minister Elliott.
Good morning, Kyle, and good morning, everyone. It's a pleasure to join you today, and it's also a great pleasure to be here with you alongside my colleague, MPP Stan Cho, Parliamentary Assistant to the Minister of Finance. Many of you will remember MPP Cho from the pre-budget roundtable that we hosted last September, and I'm really pleased that he's here with us again today. Thank you also, Tracy, for inviting us to share an overview of Ontario's 2021 budget with the Newmarket business community. In a year unlike any other, our local businesses have worked hard to keep our community safe. I want to extend my deepest appreciation to each of you for rising to the challenge and continuing to do your part to stop the spread of COVID-19. Since the onset of the pandemic, our government's top priority has been protecting the health and well-being of all Ontarians, including, of course, all of you right here in Newmarket. Ontario, like many other provinces and jurisdictions around the world, is in the midst of the third wave of the COVID-19 pandemic. This is being driven by COVID-19 variants that are much more transmissible and carry a higher risk of hospitalization, ICU admission, and unfortunately, death. We're seeing a drastic surge in case numbers and COVID-19 hospitalizations all across the province, putting our healthcare system at risk and threatening to overwhelm our hospitals. That is why yesterday, in consultation with our Chief Medical Officer of Health and other health experts, our government made the difficult decision to declare a provincial emergency and issue a stay-at-home order requiring everyone to remain at home except for essential purposes. These new and existing public health measures will work to preserve public health system capacity, safeguard vulnerable populations, and ultimately save lives. I know that this news has been difficult for many of you, especially with respect to the sacrifices that you've already made to fight this deadly virus for over a year now. But we can't have a healthy economy without healthy people, and we need to be nimble in applying public health measures to reduce the risk of transmission in our communities. Our government will continue to use every resource at our disposal to stop this virus and keep Ontarians safe, which leads us to the focus of the 2021 budget. Ontario's action plan, protecting people's health and our economy, brings the province's total response to the COVID-19 pandemic to a record $51 billion and brings our total investment to protect people's health and defeat COVID-19 to $16.3 billion. This includes more than $1 billion to support Ontario's COVID-19 vaccine distribution plan. Our vaccine rollout is already well underway, and over 2.8 million doses of the vaccine have been administered across the province to date. Locally, many of these vaccines have been administered by the team at South Lake Regional Health Centre. Throughout the pandemic, this team has worked tirelessly to deliver exceptional care to patients and families, and we are once again seeing them step up during this very critical time frame. I personally had the opportunity to visit the Ray 20 Mass Immunization Clinic earlier this year, and I can say with confidence that they are doing an incredible job. And it is something that I also have to say is one of the prime examples of how to do this right that the Premier often likes to speak about. I'm also very pleased to share that 4 of our local pharmacies in Newmarket are now administering the AstraZeneca vaccine. Though they recently joined the efforts, their work is already making a huge difference. This is, of course, exciting news, but while vaccines are being administered, continued action is needed to stop the spread of this truly deadly virus. To help make our workplaces, schools, businesses, and communities safer, our government is investing $2.3 billion more in 2021-22 for testing and contact tracing, bringing our total investment since the start of the pandemic to $3.7 billion. In addition, we are making key investments to ensure our hospitals have the resources they need to respond to any scenario. Since the start of the pandemic, our government has invested an additional $5.1 billion to help public hospitals recover, to support our hospitals. $1.2 billion has been given to public hospitals to recover from financial pressures created and worsened by COVID-19, as well as additional investments to support more than 3,100 additional beds that have been created since this pandemic began to expand our critical care capacity. But while that will help address most of our immediate concerns, we also need to do more to fix our healthcare system and improve access to high quality care for Ontarians. Long before any of us had even heard of COVID-19, our government made an ambitious commitment to end hallway healthcare. We continue to deliver on that commitment by investing an additional $21 billion over the next 10 years to build, expand, and renew hospital infrastructure across the province. This will ensure that our world-class healthcare workers have the modern infrastructure and equipment that they need to deliver exceptional care to patients and their families. We are also making additional investments to ensure that our most vulnerable community members in long-term care homes are protected now and into the future. Building on our initial investment of $1.38 billion, an additional $650 million will be used to help protect residents and staff of long-term care homes and further prevent the spread of the virus by increasing staff and buying more personal protective equipment and supplies. Locally, this means over $1.5 million to be shared across Newmarket's 4 long-term care homes. Our government is also investing $246 million to improve living conditions in long-term care homes and an additional $933 million to deliver on our commitment to add 30,000 long-term care beds.
Minister
Christine,
Elliott.
you went on mute.
Yeah.
Sorry, I'm not sure what happened there. Okay, I'll start this one again. I'm also pleased to share that this includes 576 new long-term care spaces to be allocated across 2 new long-term care homes right here in Newmarket. These spaces will help to reduce wait times so that our most vulnerable can get the care that they need sooner. But it's not just about beds, it's about the quality of care. Last November, we committed to ensuring that residents receive an average of 4 hours of direct care per day. To achieve this ambitious commitment, which makes Ontario the leader among Canadian provinces, we are investing $4.9 billion over 4 years to increase the average number of hours of direct care. We're also hiring more than 27,000 new positions, including personal support workers and nurses, and are investing over $121 million to support the accelerated training of almost 9,000 personal support workers. However, even with these improvements, we know that many seniors would rather live in their own homes and communities longer. That's why we're making it easier for seniors to stay safe in the homes they love by investing $160 million in the Community Paramedicine Program. At a local level, this means a new community paramedicine program for seniors in York Region. And finally, as part of the 2021 budget, our government is making record investments in mental health and addiction services, including an additional $175 million to enhance and expand access to the safe and effective supports Ontarians need and deserve. And I know that there are many people that are also working on the hub that is going to be created in York Region for mental health and addiction services. And those are just some of the key investments that our government is making through the 2021 budget to protect the health and well-being of Ontarians and to build a modern patient-centered healthcare system that works for everyone now and of course into the future. We know that the 14.7 million people who call Ontario home can accomplish anything we work towards on a common goal. And this is especially true for the people of Newmarket. I've always said that Newmarket has some of the best people and the best businesses in Ontario. And every day our community shows the world that the Ontario spirit, a spirit of compassion, hard work, and resilience, is alive and well in Newmarket. So thank you for continuing to do your work to stop the spread of COVID-19 and keep our community safe. Together, our collective efforts will get us through this pandemic. And when the time comes, we will rebuild and be stronger than ever so that we can continue to say that Ontario, including our wonderful Newmarket community, is the best place to live and work and raise a family. So thank you very much. And I would now like to hand it over to MPP Cho for his remarks. Thank you.
Well, thank you so much, Minister, and thank you, Kyle and Tracy and members of the Chamber for having me. It's great to see some familiar faces. Before I begin with my brief opening comments, I do want to, on a personal note, thank Minister Elliott. You know, she said it, you can't have a healthy economy without healthy people. And from the very beginning of this pandemic, I've been in perhaps a more unique position than most to see just how hard Minister Elliott has worked from the very beginning. And often doesn't get to thank you enough, but on a personal, I want to thank you for everything that you've done to guide us through these very, very difficult times, not just in Ontario, but around the world. So thank you. As Minister Elliott mentioned, this is our third phase in response to COVID-19, a $51 billion action plan. And very much the focus has been on protecting the health and safety of the people we serve. But we also recognize that there will be a time that COVID is behind us. But in the moment, during this time of great uncertainty, there must be a focus on protecting our jobs and economy. And there indeed was in this last budget we tabled a few weeks ago. In addition to the $16.3 billion invested into our healthcare system, there has been an investment of $23.3 billion to protect our jobs and economy. And let me be frank, right off the top, this budget we tabled on March 24th is not the budget we wanted to table when we tabled our last budget in November 5th of last year. We were hoping at this point that, of course, this would be a recovery and growth budget. But unfortunately, in the middle of a third wave and variants of concern, it was not possible to do so. And so this budget remains very much a protect and support budget. But the absolute time to look into laying that foundation for economic, not just recovery, but growth down the road is today. And so it's a balanced approach to making sure that when the world is over COVID-19 and we all look forward to that day, we recognize that jurisdictions around the globe will be competing for economic prosperity once again. And so we've outlined a series of measures that build off of our document tabled in November that add to a rosier fiscal sector as we move through this. And we built a lot of flexibility into the plan. And you'll see towards the back of the budget that we recognize that there is still a great deal of uncertainty in the private sector. And you'll see that in sort of the GDP projections from the private sector. And that's why our government has chosen to take the path sort of in the middle. We have a faster growth scenario, we have a slower growth scenario, and our figures are based off of sort of a middle projection, understanding that we will have more clarity as we move through the vaccination process and into the recovery stage of our economy. This means that we've had to invest significant dollars into protecting and weathering the storm. And you've seen that with the doubling of the Small Business Support Grant program, which to date has flowed over $1.5 billion into the hands of 120,000 business owners throughout this province, with grants of up to $20,000. That was doubled with no need to apply for those small businesses. But we also recognize that there were some gaps in that program. And so we also expanded a grant program to include much of the hospitality and tourism sector. We know that while hotels and motels, for example, weren't forced to close, their business levels were significantly reduced. And so that grant program was extended, along with $625 million in other supports for the tourism and hospitality sector. Some of the other highlights that we included was a doubling up of the Learners Grant Program. This gives parents $400 per child up to the age of 12, and $500 per child with special needs to help with costs at home, whether that's increased broadband or technology. But just building off of the minister's point to home care as well, we've introduced a seniors tax credit that allows for seniors to apply for a 25% tax credit for improvements to their home, whether that's for widening doorways or security systems. And we also understand how important childcare is to getting people back in the workforce, women especially, who've been hit very hard by this pandemic. And so we topped up the childcare tax credit program. That is in addition to the investment into creating 30,000 new childcare spaces, $20,000 spaces already on the way. And of course, a huge priority for our government. But we recognize also that this job is not done. And that's why in the last budget, we introduced a series of permanent measures to alleviate the pressures on our small businesses as well. That's a permanent reduction to the BET, the provincial portion of the small business property taxes, as well as an elimination of the EHT, the employer health tax, a tax on jobs for businesses with payroll up to $1 million annually. They will no longer pay that tax. We also heard from mid-sized businesses saying they needed assistance with the EHT as well. And so for payroll from $1 to $5 million annually, the EHT will now be cut in half by 50%. And again, that is a permanent change. Let me conclude my opening remarks. There's many more I'd like to discuss and hear your questions and comments by saying, I've shared my story with your chamber before. I come from the world of small business. My parents immigrated here 50 years ago from South Korea, and without that opportunity small business gave them, well, me, my sister, my brother don't have the opportunities we have today. And that's the story of millions of Ontarians across the province and many of the members that you represent. And we recognize that running a business is hard at the best of times, let alone during these very difficult ones. And so we're not done yet. Our job is not finished. And having said off the top that this budget was very much a protect and support budget, there will be a growth plan that we will present when the time is right. And so in addition to your questions about the previous budget we tabled, I'd love to hear your ideas about moving forward into that growth plan. This is something that we will be presenting to the people of this province later on in the year when the situation is appropriate. And I'm very optimistic. As I said, hope is on the horizon with the tireless efforts of Minister Elliott and the vaccine task force, and supply seeming to come into Ontario now. I think we are well positioned to be able to move quickly once vaccines are in arms. And so it is on that message of hope and looking forward to seeing you all face to face that I will pause and turn it back to you, Tracy, for some questions and discussion. Thank you.
Thank you, PHO. I appreciate that. And we do have some questions starting to come up in the chat. And there were a few that were pre-submitted. So I'm going to direct a couple. One of the questions that did come up is under the budget, most of the broadband funding has been allocated to support rural municipalities. And we're just wondering, because York Region actually has a number of gaps in broadband, so we're wondering how will the government address the broadband needs of urban areas such as Newmarket?
Well, thank you, Tracy. And having family in the East Gwillimbury area, York Region's a big region, and it's not equal. So the internet access you may have in Richmond Hill is not the access that you've got in other parts of York. I know that. I've experienced that. And we recognize that in government. And that's why, while many of our discussions have mentioned rural communities without solid connections throughout the region, we also recognize that close to the GTA, there are pockets that are under-serviced. And that is why this investment into broadband infrastructure was expanded, not just once, but several times. And so you'll recall in the last budget in November, we actually topped the investment into infrastructure up by $680 million, bringing the total investment to $1 billion. And in form sort of writing this budget, the minister and I had quite a few discussions on that very topic. How it's not just Kenora that has challenges when it comes to broadband, and I think we all know it. Broadband is now as essential as water or roads. And so that discussion led to a top-up of $2.8 billion into the broadband infrastructure investment, bringing it to $4 billion. And that's very much nation leading by a long shot. So to answer that question very directly, Tracy, it's an absolute must that we not just expand broadband to areas that are completely unserviced or very underserviced. We recognize there are gaps in the areas we traditionally thought were well serviced, and York Region will absolutely not be left behind.
Perfect. Good to hear. Certainly when the budget was released, we didn't know we were going into another stay-at-home order. And I'm wondering if the government has plans to restart and increase business assistance through the Ontario Business Support Grant. I believe that ended yesterday due to the recent shutdown measures. Will there be additional supports for businesses?
Well, Tracy, I think the Premier was clear from the get-go that we're going to do whatever it takes to get us through these very difficult times, and those discussions are ongoing. And so, Tracy, that's part of the discussion I'd like to have here today. We all know that grants, while helpful, is no substitute for being open and having life return to normal. And to get to that stage, of course, we have the hard work of Minister Elliott and the health team. But that also means that we need to be strategic here at the Ministry of Finance with a series of supports. Grants aren't just enough. And that's why I went through not just some temporary measures, but some permanent measures as well. So everything is on the table, and that will feed into sort of the growth plan that we will present later on this year when the situation allows for. And there will be a significant consultation period for that, this being included, once we start to have more certainty. And that certainty is a big piece. I don't mean to keep deferring to the private sector on this, but government, certainly politicians are not the experts on the economy, and we need to listen to the experts. And so as we have more clarity around the GDP growth, as we have more clarity around Ontario's credit rating, which continues to be maintained, we will be able to see what sort of dollars and support programs we can best make sure that we don't just weather the storm, but position businesses to succeed. Because as I say quite often, this will not be a situation when we recover of Ontario versus Quebec or Pennsylvania. The world will be competing for that recovery piece. The world will be competing for manufacturing at home and job creation at home. And so we must be strategic with our investments. But having said that, Tracy, absolutely, we recognize that businesses continue to go through a very difficult time, and new measures are being discussed. And so to your members, if you have targeted, be as specific as you like, we'll leave my email in the chat. Don't hesitate to contact us. Some of the best ideas have literally come from your members, from the members of chambers of commerce from across this province. So don't be shy with those ideas.
Great, thank you. Lynn Ford from Celestica had a question, and obviously, when we talk about ending the shutdowns and the stay-at-home orders, obviously getting vaccines into arms is key. And Lynn, I believe your question related to that from the private sector.
Yeah, this question is for Mr. Elliott. Recently, Premier Ford had mentioned that there was going to be mass testing sites set up at large manufacturers such as Amazon. like he mentioned that just recently, yesterday, I think it was. And I was just wondering if any of the budget allocation is going to be set for giving mass vaccinations at the larger manufacturing companies. I know that we are starting to set up mobile units, and I'm just wondering if those mobile units are going to be coming to the larger manufacturing facilities and, you know, other areas that have large employees, a large number of employees in them.
Well, thanks very much for the question, Lynn. And yes, there has been several $1 billion established to expand testing. We are working with the Ministry of Economic Development and encouraging large employers to do some of the fast tests, the rapid antigen tests, to screen employees until we can get more people vaccinated. We have changed some of the regulations so that it doesn't need to be provided, or the tests don't need to be provided by nurses or health professionals. We are training trainers, and so people in workplaces can be trained on how to direct fellow employees to do the tests. They're not the nasopharyngeal swabs that go to the back of your eyeballs. They're shallow nasal swabs, and they have results that come back in 15 minutes. So if Celestica is interested in becoming involved in that, we would really love to work with you on that. I know that Minister Fedeli has been speaking to many businesses about that. And we're also looking at having some mobile vaccination teams going into some of the hotspot areas right now, which are primarily in Peel and Toronto. Since we entered phase 2 of our vaccination plan, we know that there are many people that are living in some of these hot zones that are also working in services where they're working in perhaps food service industries, where they can't get out, and they may live in multi-generational homes. And so that's how the transmission is continuing to occur very quickly. So we're, instead of having them come to our vaccination sites, we are going to have mobile teams go to them and actually do the vaccinations on site. And that can be for the employees and employees' families as well. Or in some cases, I know that Linamar, for example, is working with immunizing the community. So we're looking at whatever is possible to get more needles into more arms as quickly as we can.
Okay, great. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Perfect. I see a question on the home renovation tax credit. McLeave, did you want to sorry, I didn't have your first name.
Sure. Yeah, I just had a very quick question about the renovation tax credit for seniors. I know different communities have different age groups for what's considered a senior. And do the renovations have to be specifically like grab bars or specialized bathtubs and that kind of thing? Or can it be more general in terms of walkways and that sort of thing?
Yeah, no, that's a great question. If you get, into the point of a real gray area where you want clarification on what would qualify or not, don't hesitate to reach out to my office. I'll get that exact answer for you. But high level, it's meant to be flexible. So, I did mention widening doorways. It could be a security camera system to feel more secure at home. It could be a lift up the stairs, for example. It could just be safer sort of padding around the house, etc. So it's meant to help seniors feel more comfortable aging at home. And so it's quite broad, the parameters around it. If you feel that you're into to an area that may not qualify, we've been able to sort of get some very specific answers to that. And I'm happy to help you with those sort of more granular questions. And I should have also clarified on the grant program. If in Willowdale, for example, I have many seniors living in multi-generational homes. And those homes are still able to apply for the tax credit. So even if the home is owned under, let's say, a son or a daughter's name, the senior will still be able to apply for that tax credit so long as the senior is living in that residence and be able to have that fund. And it's dollars in pocket be applied to them essentially. So it's a flexible program. In terms of the age, it's for 65 and older at the end of the taxation year in which they apply. So to be clear as well, if the senior is not drawing an income, it will be cash in hand. So it's not just a tax credit, it will also, it could be dollars in pocket as well if the senior doesn't qualify in terms of the credit program. I hope that answers your question. No problem.
Perfect. Piers Simpkin from Market Brewery, I see you had a question. Do you want to unmute or do you want me to ask it?
Oh, sorry. Sorry, the guys are talking here. Yeah, it was just about the stay-at-home order right now. Seems a little more relaxed than the January one. So just wondering, I understand everyone needs to get outside more and just for mental health. I'm an avid skier and I was able to at least get out twice this year and it was the most normal thing I experienced. So I'm just really curious why this one, there's a lot more things you're able to do versus this whole stay at home. I just feel like there's going to be much more travel versus the one in January.
Well, thank you very much for the question. We're actually asking people not to travel, to actually stay at home for the next 28 days as much as possible. But we also know that the weather is getting nicer. This is different than January in many respects. People want to be out. They want to work in their garden. They want to be able to go for walks. They want to be able to play a game of golf, whatever. And that's really important for people because we know people are fed up. This has been a really, really difficult year, economically and socially. And we know that we're seeing big issues with mental health challenges coming forward. And we know that it's important for people to be able to at least get out. That helps a little bit. We are increasing our investments in mental health because we know that those challenges are going to continue for years past the worst part of COVID. But this stay-at-home order is one that is going to, hopefully people will stay home. We'll get the numbers down. The numbers in our hospitals are frightening right now. The hospitals are very concerned, the OHA, individual hospitals. And so these are the recommendations that were made to us by the Chief Medical Officer of Health and the clinical experts about what we needed to do. And so we've followed their advice from the beginning and we're going to continue to follow it.
Thank you. Jennifer Walker, you had a question about our neighbors to the south and any concerns.
Yeah, I had a little question. I'm concerned that our neighbors to the south are already that far ahead of us and already ramping up their economy. And as you mentioned, Minister Cho, that there's going to be a big competition and we're already behind. So I'm a little concerned that we're already behind. And how do you have plans on how we're going to try to catch up?
Sure. So I'll leave the health part of that question for Minister Elliott. In terms of the economy, Jennifer, it's such a great question because obviously that's, and we said this in the last budget that we had to be balanced, sort of like the analogy the minister uses is like a boxer ready to move forward or backwards with whatever blow we're dealt. And so, we've unfortunately had to stay balanced sort of on the health pillar at this point. But Jennifer, when I say we're ready to move forward with a series of measures, we absolutely are. And I said high level, quite a few things, permanent changes as well, and maybe coming down from 10,000 feet in the air to a more granular sense. I'll just, because our friends at Market Brewery, we're just on the line. And to Market Brewery, by the way, Bear Hug IPA, fantastic. Can't wait to come and try that in person again with Minister Elliott. But just to be very granular, for example, we recognize that we will be through this time. So how are we going to help the craft beer industry? Just for example, we were able to make a change to allow craft brewers to sell their product at farmers markets. This was previously not allowed, and it just took a regulatory change. And we signaled in the budget, for example, that this will now be allowed moving forward. forward. So there are granular suggestions that we are listening to as well. And that is what I mean to the members on this call. If you have examples like that, I mean, I didn't think of that being a challenge for the craft brewers. The craft brewers very much told us that this is something that would help their bottom line. And we've had dozens of examples that have been able to be actioned through the last few documents, that will lead to that economic success. So it's not just the big stuff, Jennifer, it's the specific stuff, industry specific stuff, whether you're a nail salon, a craft brewer, a craft winery, a winery, a spa, if there's something we can do to help that recovery process today and tomorrow, this is something we're all ears on, and my office is always open to those great ideas. So Jennifer, I'd love to hear from you on some of those that you may have.
Jennifer, maybe I could just speak to the issue about why the US is further ahead than we are in the vaccine rollout. It really has everything to do about supply. As you may know, we receive our supplies through the federal government based on the contracts that they had pre-negotiated. And we did have a reduction in our supplies of the Pfizer vaccine during the end of January, first part of February, because they were retooling their plant in Belgium, which is where our supply comes from. And so we have been working with the supplies that we have, and we're now receiving greater quantities of supplies. But the US has a Pfizer facility in Kalamazoo, and they have had unlimited supplies, which we did not. But we are now expanding rapidly. Yesterday, actually for the last several days, we've been able to do over 100,000 vaccines in the last 2 days. And so based on this rate, if we're able to keep this up by the end of April, when the hopefully the stay-at-home order will then be lifted, then we will have vaccinated 40% of Ontario adults, which is going to make a huge difference for us in terms of going forward and hopefully being able to open up. So while I know this is a very difficult thing to do for many of you with vis-a-vis your businesses, this does give us time to build up our vaccine, or that herd immunity, and having 40% of Ontario adults vaccinated, at least first dose, by the end of April will really, really help us going forward.
Could I ask if there's any talk about extending the service openings? For example, MRIs are 24/7. If vaccines are the answer, can we not open up and go, let's go 24/7, just get into as many arms as we can?
Yes, that is the plan in terms of the vast vaccination centers. We have the system, we have the infrastructure ready to go. We can do over 150,000 vaccinations per day. And we just need to make sure that we get those quantities of supplies coming in, and they are starting to. Particularly the Pfizer vaccines are coming in very well. We also just received 583,400 of the AstraZeneca vaccines too. So we are expanding. We've got 700 pharmacies ready to go right now, including 4 in Newmarket. We're planning to double that number within the next month so that we will be able to deliver those supplies to all of those places, and they will be able to go 24/7 because people are willing to go virtually any time of the day or night to receive the vaccine. I know there's been some vaccine hesitancy with respect to the AstraZeneca vaccine. I received that one myself last week, and the experts say that all of them have been tested by Health Canada. They're all safe. We're not doing AstraZeneca right now for people under age 55 because they're still taking a look at that issue regarding blood clots. We should have an answer from Health Canada and NACI, our National Advisory Center on Immunology, by next week. But the experts will tell you the best vaccine for you to get is the one that's available to you, because every vaccine will spare hospitalizations and save lives. So thank you.
Thanks. And I think on that note, in general, there is still some vaccine hesitancy. So just wondering how the government will work with its regional and municipal partners and frankly, the private sector to kind of combat that hesitancy.
Well, we are basically encouraging everyone, first of all, to receive a vaccination. We know that there are some people that won't, that they are just not inclined to, and we're not proposing to make it mandatory. But it is something that we speak about every day, that, I'm happy to say that I received AstraZeneca. It's going to be safe and effective. And we encourage everyone else to, and we're doing the same with our local public health unit regions, all 34 of them. They also are going to be providing the AstraZeneca vaccines in pharmacies and in primary care offices as well, for people who may have some other health problems and really want to speak to their primary care provider, doctor or nurse practitioner, whoever it happens to be, before they receive the vaccine. So they will be available in those locations. And we are encouraging people to go there to receive them. And I think just the availability, the fact that they are available to people over 55, is a good reason to go and get it, to protect yourself, your family, and your community.
Great. James, I think you had a follow-up question to that. James Daigle.
Yeah, I was just wondering, because yesterday Premier Ford mentioned that there's still 900,000 seniors that haven't taken the vaccine. If we only get to 40, 50, 60% of the population, what is it for shutdowns and stay-at-home orders at that time if we're not getting to those numbers and the numbers stay up? Do we foresee this going beyond a month into longer periods of time?
We're not contemplating that right now. The experts have told us that if we follow the stay-at-home order that has been set up, that should dramatically reduce the number of people that we see in our hospitals and in intensive care units, and not require people to be moved around as much. You may know people who may have gone into South Lake but had to be transferred to another hospital. They're all providing excellent care, but we are encouraging the people in the older age zones to continue to receive the vaccine, and to many of them are booked now. They may not have actually been delivered, but they are booked now. We are able to book, yesterday I believe we booked 258,000 appointments through our online booking system. So we are reaching seniors. Some of them do want to be seen by their own primary care provider, and that's why we're making volumes of vaccines available there as well. So there's many options for people, but we are getting to our seniors. Absolutely, those are the people who are most at risk. So it's based on age and risk factors, and age is certainly the predominant issue that we're looking at right now.
Just a quick follow-up to that is the numbers based on a certain threshold that we need to get to for percentage wise? Like, are we aiming for a certain percent so that number can start to go on a downward trend again?
I don't think it's a specific number. I've asked that myself of the experts, but what we really need to do is take a look at where is the transmission mostly coming from to get those numbers down. And that's why we're really concentrating on those hot zones in those neighborhoods with the certain postal codes where we know a lot of transmission is happening. And that's why we're really concentrating our efforts there now, to make sure that the people in those neighborhoods who work in those factories are people that aren't able to work from home and who live in multi-generational homes as well. That's where we're seeing the transmission. So that's what we're really concentrating on, is getting that level of transmission down. And that's going to be better for all of us across the province.
Perfect. Tina Stevens, are you on the line? Because your question actually related to this, but in regards to the workplace and safety. I don't know if Tina's still on the line.
Hi, I'm here.
Oh, okay, good.
So, Tina, I have a question. We're going to run into these situations in the workplace where there are those employees that have been vaccinated, yet there are those who choose not to be vaccinated. And I'm curious as to where the government stands on the employers' rights and or obligations to keep their workplaces safe when we have those amongst us who have no intention of becoming vaccinated.
Mhm. Well, Tina, that's a great question, and it's one that we are dealing with. We have said from the beginning that we're not going to force anyone to receive a vaccine that doesn't want one. And we're going to carry on with that. We're seeing that also in healthcare. Actually, there are some healthcare workers that are also not receiving the vaccine. We're looking into some of the reasons around that. Some of it seems to be that for women in healthcare, many of them are of childbearing age, and they're a little concerned about what the vaccine would mean to them and their ability to conceive or to be able to carry a baby to term, and what would the effects be, if any, on the child. So we're working through answering all of those questions, getting as much clinical evidence as we can, and trying to strongly encourage everyone to receive the vaccine that is able to.
There was a logistics question, and I actually don't know the answer to it, and I anticipate I may get this question more often, so I am going to ask it. For employers that have employees that work in Newmarket, can they get their vaccines here even though they don't live here, or do they have to get it where they're actually living?
No, they can still get it where they're working. If it's easier for them to do that, they can make the appointment. You will be asked for your address, but if you don't live within that vicinity, you're not going to be denied the appointment.
Okay, that's great. That one did come up, so I thought, I didn't know.
We just don't want to have barriers. We want everybody who wants the vaccine to be able to get it.
Yeah, I think that is definitely fair. I do see MP Van Bynen's on the line, so I just wanted to recognize him and welcome him to the call. At some point he came on, so.
Tony.
Mike Poole.
How are you, Christine?
Very well, thanks for joining us.
Yeah, it's important what the chamber does, and it's great to hear what you're doing as an individual.
Great, thanks. Mike Poole, you had a question I saw just come up.
Yeah, I'm just curious. First of all, thank you very much for joining us. I'm really curious to know what provisions have been made within the budget to help within the safe operation of our schools, noting that the closures, and openings are having a fairly significant impact on both, parents and the mental health of students alike. Curious to know what provisions are being made to kind of continue with the safe operation of our schools now and into the future. Thank you.
Well, thank you very much for the question, Mike. That's really important. And our clinicians have said from the beginning that keeping our schools open is one of the most important things that we need to do. It's really important for children's development, for them to keep learning, of course. And some of them do well with online learning, others do not, but also for their mental health. And so we have taken many steps to, first of all, hiring the nurses to work with helping with the testing. We are going to be doing more asymptomatic testing as schools come back, to make sure that with the rapid antigen tests, to make sure that students are all negative for COVID when they come back to school. And if they're not, then there will be arrangements made for them. They will have to return home, and then we will be encouraging the full test to be done again to determine whether there is COVID there or not. And then if so, we'll be encouraging family members to become involved and be tested as well. We've also put millions of dollars into hiring more school custodians, more personal protective equipment. And as you may know, we are also making arrangements next week which is the April break that is happening for schools, for special education teachers to be vaccinated first of all, because they are dealing with students with special needs who, through no fault of their own, often don't wear masks. There may be saliva issues, other issues there. So we have agreed, we've spoken with the teachers unions. They agree that this is a group that needs to be prioritized for receiving the vaccines, as well as the teachers in the hotspot areas, primarily Peel and Toronto right now, some in York moving forward, but it's primarily in those areas because virtually 60% of Peel right now is a hotspot area. So we want to make sure that the teachers receive the vaccines as well, and that will protect them, will protect the students, and will allow our schools to remain open, because all of the clinical experts have said that that needs to be our first priority. So I hope that answers your question.
Thank you, Minister Elliott.
I mean, I think it's really important. I know we wanted to talk about the budget and all the things in the budget, and a lot of questions are coming up around the vaccinations. And of course, that's going to happen right now with everything happening, and knowing that that's kind of our what we all look towards to be able to open the economy again. So one other question that has come up, and it's really as the supply chain stabilizes, what are the plans for the rollout? So 55, 50-year-olds outside of those hot spots, do we have any sense of timing on those, Minister Elliott?
Well, we are actually moving forward faster than we originally anticipated, but certainly with the addition of another 700 pharmacies coming online, that will speed things up as well. So we're really anticipating that we will have approximately 90% of the population vaccinated by the end of June. So we are working on age, and we're dropping the age limits, first of all, and we're actually physically going into the hot spots. We're not going to sit back and wait for people to come to us. We're going to go to them because we realize that it's difficult for some people to come to us because of the nature of their work or family responsibilities, all of that. So we are going to be concentrating on getting into those zones where a lot of transmission is happening, and then gradually reducing the age groups for the mass vaccination centers. And that is moving forward quite quickly. So we, and many of those mass vaccination sites can double or triple the number of people they have coming in. It's just a question of supply. And as the supply chain for that is stabilized, and it appears that that is happening now, that we will be able to ramp up the operations in the mass vaccination sites and be able to drop the age limits even more significantly.
And that really was someone else's question. It wasn't because I'm 54 and just like under the wire. I think with that, we are coming up to time, and I want to be respectful of your time. I wondered if either PHO or you, Minister Elliott, had some closing remarks for us.
Well, first, I'd like to thank PHO for being with us today and for answering many of the questions. That was really, really helpful, and really grateful for you being here, and thankful to all of you for joining the call. Certainly, it's regrettable that we had to go to another stay-at-home order, but it's just to make sure that our healthcare system can cope with the number of people who are coming in, both with COVID, but for other reasons as well. So that if someone has a heart attack or they're involved in a serious car accident, we need to make sure that we have the capacity in our system to care for people. So if we all do our part and follow the stay-at-home rules, by the end of April, we anticipate to be in much better shape health-wise, and hopefully by then we will be able to move forward on the economic side. And so I thank you all for your patience, for your understanding, and for joining us today.
Great.
PHO, I don't know if there's anything that you would like to say in conclusion.
Well, Thank you, Minister. In 60 seconds or less, it's very appropriate. I think much of the budget discussion today did revolve around health because we're living through that third wave, but that hope really is on the horizon, Tracy. And so I hope to be invited back to discuss economic measures. I do want to give some confidence to the members, though, in terms of the numbers. We didn't get into it, but incredible prudence has been built into our province's finances. We've been able to refinance at historically low interest rates, for example, to result in hundreds of millions of dollars. We exercise fiscal prudence when times were good to be able to be adaptive for when times are bad. And we are going to continue to be transparent with the people of this province. We're the only government to have tabled this level of transparency in Canada to this point, and that's going to continue. And that's why we're confident that when we project and we have these numbers and we present our plan, that they are deliverable, they are achievable, and we are going to make sure that together we are going to get through this and be stronger than ever. And so it is with that message of hope I will leave for now and look forward and check my email every hour to see when I'm invited back to the Market Chamber once again. But thanks so much again for having me. And again, thank you so much to Minister Elliott for joining us today and for answering some very important questions.
Thank you, PHO, and Minister Elliott, again, for joining us today. We know how busy you both are, and this was a very important conversation, and we really appreciate your willingness to engage with us directly and with our members directly. And we hope that our next conversation will be about rebuilding and about reopening the economy and how we can help to do that. So we look forward to that as well. And thank you to everyone who joined us today. And we understand the frustration with the shutdown and expedited vaccine rollout. It's critical to preventing these stops and starts that are so damaging for business. And I think that Minister Elliott has been forthcoming in kind of the government's plans and how we're going to roll that out so we can reopen the province. We are going to continue to do everything in our power to advocate on behalf of our members and the broader Newmarket business community for support during this critical time. So thank you for joining us and for raising your voices and your questions. And thank you to Minister Elliott and PHO once more for giving us your time and your insights today.
It's been a great
Have a
pleasure.
good day,
Thank
everyone.
you.